Hello. All right. So, continuing on with learning about web apps. HTTP, this hypertext transfer protocol, which are the requests and responses that a web browser makes to a web server and receives back from the web server, is a stateless protocol. It is not stateful. Uh, what are the definitions of stateful and stateless? Well, the best way to understand stateful is this idea that it's like having a phone conversation with someone. So they call you and you go, hello. And they go, hi, this is Bob. And you go, oh, hi, Bob. Oh, I remember you. We last talked last week. Oh, yes, we were having a grand old time. What do you think about, going to a patio this weekend? Oh, I think that would be great. I'd love to go to a patio. And what about the weather? And you have this conversation back and forth. You know, person you're talking to asks you questions, you give answers, and those questions can depend upon what you had said previously. Imagine, you could even be talking, let's say you call in and you talk to a librarian, and the librarian's going to help you, and they, oh, well, give me your your library card, and oh, well, what do you think about a book like this? Oh, that's not the type I'm looking for. Back and forth. The librarian remembers. The librarian knows who you are. All of everything that happens on that conversation keeps track of everything that's happening. The state of the conversation, the state of the transaction, so to speak, that you're having. And you could be doing lots of different things, and you maintain this connection for the entire time. Now, that may be what it seems like you're doing when you're connecting to these websites. You're there. Yeah, they remember who you are. It's not like they forget. Well, sometimes some badly programmed ones forget, but most of the time they know who you are and they remember what you've done before. And one request can lead to another that has memories of this and that. It seems stateful, but underneath it all, it's not. In reality, HTTP is stateless. All right. Stateless is absolutely along the lines of, you get a phone call and someone says, what's the weather? And you go and you look out the window and you're like, it's cloudy. And they go, bye. And you hang up. Someone else calls you and they say, what's the weather? And you can give them the same answer. You're not like, you just asked me that. Why are you asking it again? It's not weird. It's a whole separate phone call. But let's say this first person calls back and they say, they wanted to ask some question about the nature of the cloudy weather based upon your previous answer or something. I don't know. You have no clue who you're talking to. Every single call that you get, with HTTP, you have no idea who you're talking to. And you only do you get a single request from them. So you get basically it's one of those single URLs that comes in with a resource and, and a query string. That's it. You run code and you send back your results and you hang up the phone. You hang up the connection. It's done. It's over. You have no idea in the world who you're talking to. You're just doing stuff and responding. And you're like, if that's the case, how in the world do all these websites work? All right, so there's a solution, cookies. When the web was created, they didn't exist. Netscape was a hot startup, and they realized, wow, it's this stateless protocol. Sure, some things, maybe my example asking for the weather, that actually works well, great. But there are other things like I'd like to imagine shopping. I'd like you to have a shopping cart. I'd like to contain the stuff. How am I going to do that? How am I going to maintain this notion that you're going around a website, you're like, oh yeah, add this to my shopping cart, add this to my shopping cart. Are we going to ask you to type in your username and password every time you want to put something in a shopping cart? Because that would be like a single oh, You want to put something in your shopping cart. Well, you have to tell us who you are and authenticate yourself to be sure that we can put it in your shopping cart. But the moment you do that, we're going to forget who you were because we just hung up the phone and we didn't write any, we have no way of knowing when you call back that it was you. And Netscape's like, we'd really like this internet to be a big, big thing. We know it's going to be big and we're making tons of money off of it. So they just simply put together and they're like, we've invented cookies. And the idea was at the web server side, that's you, the developer, because that's who you are in this course, you're the developer. What happens when someone connects to you, you actually go, you know what? I've never seen you before. So I'm going to send back a unique identifier in a string and then let you hold on to that. Or, oh, you're logging in. Oh, nice to see you again, Mary. What I'm going to do is I'm going to store your user ID in this string, and I'm going to send back this string, this cookie with you, along with the HTML I send back. And please, could you be so kind as to hold on to that string and associate it only with my website. Don't associate it with other people's website. Keep your cookies separate. And you know what? The next time you call my website, next time you make a connection, you ask for one of my URLs, you know what? When you ask for it, please also send along that string, send along that cookie. And so when Mary makes another request, clicks the link or submits something, Mary sends along, oh, here's my user ID. And you, as the website, you go, that's so cool, Mary. I know it's you. Oh, your bank balance is great. Everything's wonderful and fine. I will let you do that transfer. All right. So it was a way to basically put back an identifier of some form. Now you could put all sorts of stuff into the cookie. There's a limit to its size. And so for most implementations, what in general we try to do is to put a unique identifier into the cookie, and then we tie that unique identifier to, for example, your identity in a database, and you're connected into the database. And you've seen us making these schemas that have like a users table. That's the whole idea, is we would then be able to know that it was you and to connect you and talk about you with respect to all the other data. And we will deal with this whole notion of authentication and authorization in 342. We're not going to dig into it this term. We might have reason to want to record state to be able to identify someone, or record some variables or something. And the way that we do that in Rails, so Rails has a special hash named session. Okay, and if we put anything in the session hash, Rails takes care of very nicely of sending that back as part of the cookie for it to be saved in the browser, which saves it to a file for later use and so forth, and every other request sends it back to us. So it's a super easy way for you to access and deal with cookies. Rails is really smart. It encrypts that cookie, so the person gets back an encrypted string. It's not something that they themselves can read or decrypt. Only you, the website developer, has the ability to decrypt and understand what you put into that. Even so, you shouldn't be putting anything into it that is highly secure. At most, you should be putting in is like a user identification of some form or sort. You shouldn't be putting other information in there. All right, nevertheless, so that's what you do. So for example, let's take an example just to help make this a little bit clearer. So let's say you had a guessing game. And this guessing game was all about pick a number between 1 and 100. And so the computer has a number in mind, and your job is to put in your guesses, and it tells you higher, lower, higher. and as you use your great searching skills and eventually you guess it and it says, congratulations, you guessed it in 6 guesses, something along those lines. So what's the state of that? What would we need for a guessing game, to remember where we were in that game? So in other words, someone calls you up and they make a guess and you go higher, and then they hang up the phone. What would you want to send back to them in that cookie, that if you wanted to store that state? Well, what is the state? Well, the state is everything we need to know where we are in the game. And for that, it's the number of guesses made so far, because we're going to eventually want to report that. We can't keep track of that just magically. We actually have to write it down somewhere. So that's part of the state for us to keep track of. And the other thing that we would need to know is the number. That's part of the state. And this is assuming that, again, we have an ability to uniquely identify the person we're playing the game with. So either, yes, we're putting a cookie in with this information in, and so that's great. We get that back when they send us in their next guess. Alternatively, again, we could be storing user ID and then store this state information in a database. All right. So that's what we could have. And let's say we wanted to save that in the cookie. In Rails, we would have session, and then we could use a symbol like we could say it's the guess number. This is the number that they need to guess. And let's say this was initially when we set it, we used ran, and we got a number between 1 and 100. So we did something like this, all right? So this then would save the name and the value into the cookie for us. And then later when we wanted it on the next request, we would be able to get it back very simply by just saying, let's say number is equal to session, and then we would read it back out. Guess number. All right. And again, we are unlikely to do much with the session. If we do, I'll guide you through it. But that's how it works. But it's important to remember that HTTP is a stateless protocol. We just get a request in and we give a response back. If we want to keep track of who it is we're communicating with and the state of whatever the system is and the transactions and things that they're doing, we need to be able to send back some identification so that when they contact us with their next request, we know who it is, and then we can go look up in our history that we've stored in the database with them to know what should we do, what should we be displaying, and so forth and so on.